My teacher grabbed me at a coffee shop, reeking of alcohol at 2 p.m., and pulled me toward her apartment. When I tried to pull away, she pressed against me and said, "Come on, don't be such a baby." I stayed silent, but it was the last time I ever did. When Ms. Khalifa was fired, Kyle became the most hated kid in our all-boys school because he was the one to report her. Ms. Khalifa was 23 and looked like she stepped out of every teenage boy's fantasy. Long black hair, legs for days, and this way of leaning over desks that made even the smart kids forget basic math. Then Kyle had to go and ruin everything. The day after she got escorted out by security, my friend Lucas pulled me aside. "Stay away from Kyle. That jealous V-card holder made up lies because she wouldn't give him attention." The whole cafeteria went dead silent when Kyle walked in, like that awkward silence where everyone's thinking, did he catch me gooning in the bathroom? Someone launched a milk carton at his head, and everyone exploded laughing. Kyle just wiped the milk off his face and sat alone. Didn't fight back. Just unwrapped his sandwich like his entire social life hadn't just been destroyed. I watched Kyle over the next few weeks and saw his life become hell. Someone spray-painted SNITCH across his locker. Groups of guys would corner him between classes, shoving him into walls. They'd share stories about Ms. Khalifa, then glare at Kyle like he personally canceled Christmas. "Remember when she wore that red dress?" they'd say. "Now we got Mrs. Henderson, who's literally decomposing." But here's what didn't compute. Despite everyone treating him like the plague, Kyle kept showing up early, tutoring 7th graders. When Brad Thompson tried to fight him, Kyle just said, "You don't understand what she really was," and walked away. Everything changed when I got an email from Ms. Khalifa. My soul evacuated my body when I saw her name. She said she missed her special students and wanted to meet up, even gave me her number. I immediately showed Lucas and the guys at lunch. They practically hoisted me up like I discovered fire. "You're the chosen one, bro," Lucas said, slapping my back. "Don't fumble this for us." I texted her that night. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop downtown Saturday. When I showed up, she looked even better than I remembered. She hugged me, and I swear I ascended. She said I looked mature. The first 20 minutes were everything I'd fantasized about. She laughed at my jokes, kept touching my arm. Then things got weird fast. She suggested we go to her apartment. When I hesitated, she grabbed my hand and started pulling me toward the door. "Come on, don't be such a baby." Her grip was actually hurting. I tried to pull away, but she got this look that made my stomach drop. "What's wrong? Isn't this what you wanted?" She was pressing against me, and I could smell alcohol on her breath at 2 in the afternoon. That's when Kyle appeared out of nowhere. He grabbed my other arm and yanked me away. "We're leaving, now." He dragged me to his parents' restaurant next door and drove me home without saying much. I made the mistake of telling Lucas what happened. His face contorted and he started laughing. That cruel laugh that makes you reevaluate your friendship. You seriously chickened out and let Kyle cuckblock you? By Monday, the whole school heard Lucas's version where I was too scared, and Kyle ruined it because he's jealous. Even when I tried explaining she was being aggressive and scary, they just called me a gay little bitch. I went to Principal Morrison, but he barely looked up from his computer. "Missy Khalifa is no longer employed here. Stop creating drama." That afternoon, I saw 6 seniors corner Kyle by the gym, screaming about him ruining another chance for everyone. 2 days later, everything went nuclear. Someone made a fake Grindr profile with Kyle's photos and printed hundreds of explicit screenshots. They were everywhere. Taped inside bathroom stalls, stuffed in locker vents. The worst ones were photoshopped with Kyle's face doing unspeakable things. His parents owned this small Filipino restaurant downtown, and people taped the photos all over their windows. I saw a video in the group chat of Kyle trying to tear down photos while crying, and people just filming and laughing. Nobody helped him. I found Kyle at his house 3 days later. His family was packing boxes like evacuating before a disaster. His mom answered with the reddest eyes I've ever seen and just pointed upstairs. Kyle was sitting on his bedroom floor surrounded by boxes. When he saw me, he shook his head. "We're moving to my aunt's in Colorado." He went quiet for so long I thought he'd fallen asleep. I was 12 when she started paying attention to me. 12. She knew my parents were divorcing, knew I was failing English. He showed me screenshots from other boys she was messaging from nearby schools. She wasn't fired for one incident. I spent months collecting evidence. My little sister won't look at me because of what her classmates told her. His voice cracked. He handed me a flash drive. "Give this to the police. Maybe they'll do something when it's not just my word." I sat in my car outside Kyle's house for 20 minutes, just staring at the flash drive. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. The weight of what Kyle had told me pressed down on my chest like concrete. 12 years old. She'd targeted him when he was 12. I pulled out my phone and texted Lucas. "We need to talk." Through Kyle's bedroom window, I could see him watching me from behind the curtain. He gave a small wave before disappearing. Lucas responded immediately with a string of laughing emojis followed by, "Did the effigy try to convert you too?" My stomach churned. I shoved the phone in my pocket and started driving toward the police station. The flash drive felt like it was burning a hole through my jeans pocket. Every red light made me want to scream. I kept seeing Kyle's face when he talked about his little sister not looking at him anymore. The police station smelled like old coffee and disappointment. The desk sergeant barely glanced up from his crossword puzzle when I approached. I placed the flash drive on the counter and explained it contained evidence about a teacher who'd been inappropriate with students. He picked it up like it was a used tissue, turned it over once, then slid it back to me. The detective who handles these things wouldn't be back until Monday. Maybe I should file a report online instead. He went back to his puzzle before I could respond. I drove home in a daze. The flash drive felt heavier now, like it contained the weight of every kid Ms. Khalifa had hurt. When I pulled into our driveway, my mom was already standing on the porch with her arms crossed. That stance meant trouble. She started talking before I even got out of the car. The school had emailed her about me and Kyle harassing staff with wild accusations about Ms. Rodriguez. I tried to correct her that it was Ms. Khalifa, but she wasn't listening. She waved a printed email in my face. The school counselor had expressed concern about my fixation on the terminated teacher and my inappropriate involvement with troubled student Kyle. The words blurred together as I read. They made it sound like I was the problem, like Kyle was the problem, not the 23-year-old woman who'd been grooming children. My mom demanded answers, but I couldn't find the words. How could I explain what I didn't fully understand myself? I made a choice that would haunt me. I lied, told her it was all a misunderstanding, that I'd drop it. She studied my face for a long moment before going inside. Through the kitchen window, I watched her pick up the phone. She was calling the school counselor about my concerning behavior with troubled students. I could hear snippets of the conversation through the screen door. "Yes, he's been acting strange." "No, I had no idea about Kyle. Of course I'll monitor the situation." My phone buzzed 3 times in quick succession. Lucas had sent a link to a new meme page dedicated to Kyle. The images made me want to throw my phone against the wall. The second text was from Kyle. Just 3 words and a letter. "You okay? K." The third made my blood freeze. Ms. Khalifa asking everything okay, sweetie? With a heart emoji. My hands trembled as I stared at her message. I needed to maintain my cover. Needed her to think I was still interested. So I responded with a casual, "Yeah, just got home." The typing indicator appeared immediately. She was writing something long. The dots appeared and disappeared several times like she was editing her message. My anxiety anxiety spiked with each second. Finally, the paragraph arrived. She was worried about me associating with disturbed individuals. Some boys misinterpret attention and project their issues onto others. She hoped I wasn't being influenced by negative people. My 13-year-old brother appeared in my doorway. His friends were saying I was obsessed with that teacher who got fired. He wanted to know if it was true. The confusion and disappointment in his eyes hit harder than any of Lucas's insults. I told him it was complicated and he rolled his eyes. Everything was complicated with me lately, apparently. He stomped back to his room and slammed the door. I locked my bedroom door and plugged in the flash drive. My laptop took forever to boot up. When the folders finally loaded, my heart stopped. There was one labeled Others. Inside were screenshots of conversations with 3 different boys. One name jumped out immediately. David Chen from the honor roll, the kid who'd won the state science fair last year. The messages started the same way mine had. Compliments about being special, mature, different from other boys. Then escalating to meetings outside school. The next morning, I tried a different approach. The school required parent signatures for security footage requests. I practiced my mom's signature 50 times before driving to school. The front desk lady, Mrs. Patterson, had known me since freshman year. She barely looked at the form before her eyes narrowed. She held it up to the light like checking for counterfeit money. This didn't look like my mother's signature. Did I really think I could forge documents? She kept the form and said she'd be calling my parents. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. When I answered, a woman identified herself as Ms. Johnson, a teacher friend of Ms. Khalifa's. She still had access to the gradebook and wanted me to know what kind of student I really was. Problem students like me always tried to blame others for their failures. She had documentation of every missing assignment, every failed test. The call ended before I could respond. My failed freshman year was coming back to destroy me. Mom was waiting in the living room when I got home. She had that look that meant a long conversation was coming. Remember when you thought Mr. Davis was out to get you? This was just like freshman year all over again. I'd had a breakdown then, convinced my English teacher was sabotaging me. Turned out I just wasn't turning in assignments. Was this another episode? Was I having another breakdown? The concern in her voice mixed with exhaustion. She was tired of my drama. That evening, someone posted an Instagram story of me at the police station. Within an hour, it had been screenshotted and reframed. Local boy stalks innocent teacher after she rejected advances. The caption made me sound like a predator. Comments poured in about how I'd always been weird, always staring at Ms. Khalifa in class. People who'd never spoken to me suddenly had stories about my creepy behavior. The narrative was being rewritten in real time. I tried gathering witness statements the next day. Every teacher I approached gave me the same warning. Stop harassing staff regarding terminated employees. Mr. Brooks threatened to call security if I didn't leave his classroom. Ms. Anderson said she'd be reporting my behavior to the principal. Even Mr. Garcia, who'd always been cool, shook his head and told me to let it go. The wall of silence was absolute. My phone lit up with a notification from an unknown Instagram account. Ms. Khalifa had created a backup profile and was sharing screenshots, emails I'd sent her asking for extra help last year. They looked different out of context. Desperate. Obsessive. One included a note from the counselor recommending therapy for my adjustment issues. She'd saved everything, waiting for the right moment to deploy it. The caption read, "Some boys can't handle rejection," with a broken heart emoji. 3 hours of sleep left me dizzy and disoriented. I was trying to send Kyle evidence that Ms. Khalifa was building a case against us. My finger slipped, and I sent the screenshot to the wrong group chat, the one with Lucas and the guys. I deleted it immediately, but Brad had already screenshot it. Too late, bro, already saved. Within minutes, everyone knew I had evidence about Ms. Khalifa. The speculation started immediately. Was I trying to blackmail her? Was this why she rejected me? Marcus found me after school. We'd been best friends since middle school. His parents had forbidden him from hanging out with me anymore. Lucas had told them things. About my obsession, about the police station, about how I was stalking an innocent woman. Marcus looked genuinely sorry. His scholarship depended on staying out of drama. He couldn't risk it. He walked away, and I knew our friendship was over. Another casualty in a war nobody else understood. The whispers started that week. Parents picking up their kids would stop talking when they saw me. Point subtly. That's the boy who's obsessed with Ms. K. Some pulled their sons away like I was contagious. The narrative had spread beyond school. I was becoming a pariah in my own community. The first signs of the complete social destruction that was coming. Nobody wanted the full story. They'd already decided who the villain was. Kyle texted me that night. Ms. Khalifa claimed she was at a teaching conference during one of the incidents he'd reported. He'd mixed up the dates. She actually had been away that weekend. It was a small error, but it would destroy his credibility if it came out. One mistake in months of evidence and everything would unravel. I told him it didn't matter, that we had enough other proof, but doubt was creeping in. What else had he gotten wrong? My college recommendation letters were due soon. The guidance counselor pulled me aside. I'd need to explain the gap where Ms. Khalifa's evaluation should have been. It would look suspicious to admissions committees. A student who couldn't maintain appropriate relationships with teachers. The subtext was clear. I was being marked as a problem student. My future was being sabotaged by her absence as much as her presence had damaged Kyle's past. I made a desperate decision that night. My sister was a senior, student council president, perfect record. She had a key card that accessed the school after hours. I begged her for help. She saw the desperation in my eyes and relented. Just this once. If I got caught, she'd never forgive me. I promised I just needed to check something. She handed over the card with a warning. This was the only time she could help. Her position mattered too much. The school felt different in darkness. Every shadow seemed like security. I made it to the records room and found what I was looking for. Logs showing Ms. Khalifa's keycard accessing the building at times she claimed she wasn't there. I took photos with my phone, hands shaking. When security reviewed the logs later, they'd see my sister's card used after hours. I'd look like a stalker breaking in. The trap was closing around me. The next morning brought a small victory. The police finally took the flash drive. The desk sergeant from before wasn't there. A younger officer actually listened, took notes, said they'd investigate. Kyle and I exchanged relieved texts. Maybe something would finally happen. We met briefly at the park to celebrate. Someone saw us together. By lunch, the story had morphed. We were conspiring together again. Two obsessed boys validating each other's delusions. The certified letter arrived that afternoon. Ms. Khalifa was filing a restraining order against me. The court date was set. I'd have to face her again, this time in front of a judge. The grocery store parking lot was packed that Saturday morning. I'd gone with my mom to help with shopping, trying to act normal despite the restraining order paperwork burning in my backpack. Ms. Khalifa appeared near the produce section, chatting with Lucas's mother like they were old friends. My stomach dropped as I watched her lean in, touching Mrs. Martinez's arm while gesturing toward Lucas's younger brother. She mentioned something about struggling students and extra help. Mrs. Martinez's face lit up with gratitude. I ducked behind a display, but Ms. Khalifa had already spotted me. Her eyes widened in mock surprise before she grabbed Mrs. Martinez's arm, pointing in my direction. I couldn't hear the words, but watched Mrs. Martinez's expression shift from friendly to concerned. She pulled her younger son closer, while Ms. Khalifa shook her head sadly. By the time they finished talking, Mrs. Martinez was nodding sympathetically and exchanging phone numbers with her. The court hearing came faster than expected. I sat in the waiting area, my cheap suit feeling too tight around my neck. Ms. Khalifa arrived looking professional and vulnerable in a conservative dress, tissues already in hand. Her lawyer, a sharp-looking woman in her 50s, whispered instructions while shooting me disapproving glances. My parents sat behind me, their disappointment radiating like heat. Inside the courtroom, both sides presented their versions. I explained about the coffee shop incident, how she'd grabbed me, the alcohol on her breath. My voice shook as I described feeling trapped. Ms. Khalifa's lawyer countered with a different narrative. A troubled student with a history of mental health issues who developed an unhealthy fixation. A young teacher trying to help who'd been rewarded with stalking and harassment after her termination. The evidence phase destroyed me. Brad had submitted screenshots from our group chat. Messages I'd sent months ago appeared on the courtroom screen. Comments about Ms. Khalifa being hot enough to die for. Jokes about what I'd do if given the chance. Crude teenage boy humor that now looked like obsession. My lawyer objected, but the damage was done. The judge's expression had already shifted from neutral to skeptical. Ms. Khalifa took the stand, dabbing at her eyes. She described feeling unsafe, being followed, receiving unwanted contact. She produced the text I'd sent saying I was home, claiming it proved I was tracking her movements. The Instagram story from the police station became evidence of stalking. Every interaction reframed through the lens of an unstable student pursuing an innocent teacher. The judge's ruling came down like a hammer. My claims of assault were dismissed as teenage fantasy gone wrong. The restraining order was granted. 500 feet minimum distance. No contact through third parties. Any violation would result in criminal charges. I sat frozen as the judge lectured me about respecting boundaries and seeking appropriate help for my issues. That night, I found myself at a different grocery store across town. My brother needed poster board for a school project, and Mom refused to go anywhere Ms. Khalifa might be. While searching for supplies, I overheard two moms from his school talking. That nice young teacher who'd been helping with math tutoring. So sweet to volunteer her time after being falsely accused. My brother later mentioned the lady who knew me had given him candy after tutoring. She'd asked about our family, seemed really interested in how I was doing. The doorbell camera notification came at 3 a.m. I watched the footage on my phone, Ms. Khalifa's figure approaching our front door in the darkness. She left an envelope, looked directly at the camera, then walked away. My dad retrieved it the next morning. A letter expressing concern about my well-being, hoping my parents would get me the help I needed. Professional stationery, perfect grammar, the image of a caring educator. What the camera also caught was me watching from my bedroom window. Another piece of evidence that I was the one obsessed. Kyle's password hint came back to me during a particularly sleepless night. Something he'd mentioned during the car ride home. His mother's maiden name plus his old apartment number. I tried various combinations on the chat platform Ms. Khalifa had used. Success came on the 15th attempt. The archived conversations loaded slowly. Hundreds of messages spanning months. The final one sent chills down my spine. She'd asked if he was alone. The timestamp was 30 minutes before she'd been fired. School became unbearable. Someone had created a Pinterest board titled Healing from False Accusations, and Ms. Khalifa had shared it. Teachers from across the district were commenting with support. The narrative had spread beyond our school. She was becoming a symbol of young educators persecuted by disturbed students. Local teacher Facebook groups shared her story as a cautionary tale. The comments section filled with sympathy and outrage. My therapist appointment had been scheduled months ago for general anxiety. Now it became evidence. The subpoena arrived on a Tuesday. All session notes related to romantic fixations and difficulty accepting rejection would be reviewed. Dr. Martinez looked apologetic as she explained she had no choice. Professional ethics required compliance. My private struggles with social anxiety and freshman year crush on a senior girl would now be twisted into proof of a pattern. The grocery store incident happened 2 weeks later. I'd been documenting Ms. Khalifa's movements, trying to establish patterns for evidence. She entered the store just as I was leaving. Instead of walking away, I pulled out my phone and followed at a distance. She noticed immediately, screaming that I was stalking her again. Security arrived within minutes. The footage showed exactly what it looked like. Me following her through multiple aisles, phone in hand. My brother's school pickup became a daily ordeal. Ms. Khalifa's new tutoring center sat directly on the route. Every day, I technically violated the restraining order just trying to get him home. I started making my mom do pickups, but she worked late twice a week. Those days I'd circle the long way, adding 20 minutes to avoid the building. Other parents noticed the weird routes, the way I'd suddenly change direction if I saw her car. The janitor, Mr. Williams, had been at our school for 30 years. Kyle had mentioned him as a witness who'd seen him leaving Ms. Khalifa's classroom crying. I tracked him down at his new job at the mall. He looked tired when I approached, immediately shaking his head. He had grandkids to think about, couldn't afford to lose his pension over this mess. He'd seen nothing, heard nothing, and wanted to keep it that way. Another door slammed shut. Something strange caught my eye at the next court appearance. Ms. Khalifa was wearing a physics team jacket identical to Kyle's. Same color, same patches, even the same wear pattern on the sleeves. Either she'd bought one exactly like his, or had one custom made. The level of obsession it showed made my skin crawl, but pointing it out would make me look even more unstable. Who notices such details except someone truly obsessed? Her lawyer made an offer during recess. Drop everything, admit publicly that Kyle had manipulated me, apologize for the harassment. In exchange, she'd drop the criminal charges she was preparing. The deal had an expiration date, 24 hours to decide, accept and salvage what was left of my future, or refuse and face complete destruction. The choice was framed as obvious. Only someone choosing sick obsession over sanity would refuse. I refused. The reaction was immediate. New narratives spread about my inability to let go, my choice to destroy my own life rather than admit the truth. Even my parents questioned the decision. Why not just apologize and move on? Why protect Kyle when he'd already left town? The isolation deepened. I was now the boy who chose delusion over redemption. Kyle called that night, his voice shaking. He'd been reviewing his evidence and found an error. The library incident he'd reported happened on a different day than he'd claimed. Security footage would prove him wrong about the date. But when I suggested checking the correct date, we discovered something worse. The actual day showed an even more serious incident. His timeline error had accidentally uncovered darker evidence. The cloud backup revelation came during another late-night call. Kyle hadn't just given me the only copy of evidence. He'd uploaded everything to multiple secure accounts before handing over the flash drive. Even if something happened to the physical evidence, copies existed. He gave me access to one account, a backup plan in case things went wrong. Smart kid, traumatized but strategic. My supposed proof started falling apart under scrutiny. The most damaging revelation came from Ms. Khalifa's lawyer. What I'd interpreted as grooming messages about Kyle were actually her helping him with a legitimate college essay about his parents' divorce. Context destroyed perception. Each piece of evidence could be explained away. A caring teacher helping a struggling student, nothing more. My sister found me in the kitchen at 2 a.m., stress eating cereal. She sat down without a word, sliding her phone across the table. She'd been monitoring school social media, screenshotting conversations about me, teachers discussing my deteriorating behavior, parents warning each other, students making memes. She couldn't risk more than this passive help. Her position as student council president, her college applications, everything hung in the balance. She'd already done more than she should by giving me the key card. The manipulation tactics I learned from watching Ms. Khalifa proved useful. I started attending the same yoga class as the mother of a boy in her new tutoring program. Casual conversations about kids and school, slowly building trust, planting seeds of concern without seeming obvious. The woman mentioned her son had been acting differently since starting tutoring, more secretive. I suggested she check his phone just to be safe. The seed was planted. Coffee shop encounters could be accidents. Running into Ms. Khalifa's roommate at the local cafe seemed natural enough. Weather discussions and complaints about rent prices. She mentioned Ms. Khalifa had been staying out late recently, coming home emotional, different guys picking her up. The roommate seemed concerned but not suspicious. I memorized every detail while maintaining a boring conversation about the weather. Social media became an unexpected ally. Ms. Khalifa couldn't help oversharing, even while claiming to be traumatized. Tagged locations on posts contradicted her court statements about feeling unsafe. Photos showed her at bars near my neighborhood when she claimed to be avoiding the area. Her public Pinterest boards revealed shopping habits and frequent locations. Digital breadcrumbs leading to evidence. Kyle's father emerged from the divorce silence with explosive timing. He wanted to sue the school for millions, claiming they'd failed to protect his son. His lawyer sent cease and desist letters to everyone involved. The criminal case ground to a halt as civil litigation threats flew. Kyle begged his dad to stop, but custody agreements meant he had no say. The money-hungry father was derailing everything. Fighting two battles meant sacrifices. The SAT registration deadline passed while I was gathering evidence. My guidance counselor marked it as poor planning skills in my file, another mark against my character. College applications would show a student who couldn't manage basic responsibilities. The future I'd worked toward crumbled while I fought for truth nobody wanted to hear. Legal fees drained my parents' savings. Credit cards maxed out while Ms. Khalifa crowdfunded her defense. Teachers donated. Parents contributed. The narrative of a young educator destroyed by false accusations resonated. Meanwhile, my family argued about money over dinner. My brother couldn't have friends over because their parents didn't want them in our house. The boy who stalked a teacher lived here. The memorial service should have been neutral ground. A student had died in a car accident, and the whole school gathered to mourn. I sat in the back, far from Ms. Khalifa, but she noticed me and loudly expressed feeling unsafe with her stalker present. The grieving family, already overwhelmed, asked us both to leave. Another public scene where I looked like the aggressor. Even at a funeral, I couldn't escape the narrative. My tutoring job ended with a formal letter. Inability to maintain appropriate boundaries with students. The tutoring center couldn't risk having someone with my reputation working with minors. The replacement they hired came recommended by Ms. Khalifa's friend. Another door closed. Another connection to her world. The isolation was systematic and complete. Housing situations shifted like tectonic plates. My parents moved my bedroom to the basement, away from street-facing windows. Less chance of me being seen watching the street. Meanwhile, Ms. Khalifa moved in with a new boyfriend who happened to live in Kyle's old neighborhood, the same streets where Kyle's family restaurant had been vandalized. The coincidence felt deliberate, like she was claiming territory. My dad's breaking point came on a Thursday evening. He found me organizing evidence at 3 a.m., photos and timestamps spread across my bedroom floor. His voice cracked as he begged me to let it go before I destroyed our whole family. My brother couldn't have friends over anymore. Mom cried herself to sleep. The whispers at his office were getting louder. How much more could they take? His words cut deep because they were true. Mr. Brooks became collateral damage in my investigation. I'd approached him multiple times for witness statements, despite warnings. The school launched an investigation into why he hadn't reported signs of inappropriate behavior if he'd known. His pregnant wife confronted me in the parking lot, tears streaming. How could I do this to them? He was suspended pending review, their income halved with a baby coming. My pursuit of justice was destroying innocent lives. The Brooks family situation deteriorated rapidly. His wife blamed him for not protecting students, for not seeing the signs. If he'd known enough to be questioned, why hadn't he acted? Their marriage strained under the weight of suspicion and financial pressure. Another family cracking under the pressure of my investigation. The guilt ate at me, but stopping meant letting Ms. Khalifa win. Even Kyle started doubting. During a panic attack over video call, he asked the question I'd been dreading. What if we were wrong about some of it? What if some incidents were misinterpreted? The doubt in his voice was contagious. I couldn't answer immediately because I'd wondered the same thing. How much was real, and how much had we convinced ourselves was true? But we'd come too far to stop. Public admission became necessary strategy. To maintain any credibility about the assault, I had to admit to following her, documenting her movements. Yes, I'd technically stalked her, but only to gather evidence. The admission felt like swallowing glass, but it was the only way to keep the assault claim alive. I was trading my reputation for a chance at justice. The September text haunted me more than anything else. Kyle had reached out months before the final incident. A simple message saying she wouldn't leave him alone. I'd seen it, read it, and done nothing. Marked as read with no response. I thought he was being dramatic, looking for attention. The evidence of my failure glowed on the screen. I could have helped earlier, but dismissed his cry for help. Emergency motions threw off all timing. Ms. Khalifa's lawyer filed to move the trial up while Kyle was still in Colorado. My lawyer had food poisoning the day of the hearing. Everything aligned against us. The system seemed determined to protect her while punishing anyone who questioned the narrative. Each legal maneuver cost more money we didn't have. Understanding Ms. Khalifa's psychology became crucial. Through the messages and patterns, a picture emerged. She genuinely believed she'd loved Kyle, that she was helping him through the divorce. The delusion ran deep. Her emails showed a desperate need for validation, mixed with predatory targeting of vulnerable boys. She was sick, but self-aware enough to cover her tracks. A dangerous combination. Betrayal felt like acid in my throat. To prove the damage she'd caused, I had to share Kyle's sewer slide attempt. The promise to never tell anyone shattered as I handed over hospital records. His privacy violated for the greater good. The old version of me, who respected boundaries and kept secrets, died that day. Strategic calculation replaced human decency. Kyle's private medical records appeared on my phone screen. Screenshots saved before he could change his mind about sharing. Documentation of therapy sessions, medication adjustments, the full scope of trauma. Each image felt like another betrayal, but they were necessary. Without proof of damage, she'd walk free. I'd become someone I didn't recognize, someone who'd violate trust for evidence. Car surveillance provided the breakthrough. Ms. Khalifa claimed she was never at certain locations during specific times, but traffic cameras and parking apps told different stories. Her car appeared in timestamp photos at locations she'd denied visiting. Building a pattern of lies took patience, but the the evidence accumulated, digital footprints revealing truth despite her careful construction of alibis. Small victories felt hollow. The judge excluded some evidence but allowed others. Each minor win came at massive cost. Seeing Ms. Khalifa crying in the courthouse hallway while I sat in a different corridor, both of us visibly destroyed by the process. We'd become mutual destruction, two lives intertwined in the worst possible way. Neither of us would emerge whole. The defamation counterclaim gained traction with a tired judge who'd seen too many cases. He questioned whether public statements about her behavior constituted libel. The legal quicksand deepened, fighting the original charges while defending against new ones. Each appearance cost money and dignity, the system grinding both accuser and accused into dust. Everything hinged on Kyle flying back to testify. His presence would make or break the case. Without his direct testimony, everything else was circumstantial. The tickets were booked, the date set. Both sides prepared for the confrontation that would determine everything. The countdown began to the moment when truth and lies would collide in open court. Past kindness became present leverage. I tutored Ms. Khalifa's nephew the previous year, helping him pass algebra. Now the kid approached me at the store, asking why I was being mean to Aunt Mia. She'd weaponized a child's gratitude. The boy's innocent question hit harder than any legal threat. Another relationship poisoned by her manipulation. Teachers chose sides based on politics rather than truth. Union representatives supported Ms. Khalifa. Those who controlled recommendation letters aligned with her narrative. Speaking out meant career sewer slide for any teacher. The few who privately expressed doubts publicly maintained silence. Professional survival trumped justice. The wall of institutional protection stood firm. Pattern requirements frustrated the prosecutor. Two victims weren't enough without physical evidence. The system needed more damaged children to take it seriously. The threshold for action remained frustratingly high. How many boys had to suffer before patterns became proof? The legal machinery moved slowly while predators adapted quickly. My grandfather's connection to the retired principal became the last card to play. Before his death, he'd helped Principal Edwards through a difficult time. I called in the marker, invoking a dead man's favor. Edwards agreed to provide personnel files but wouldn't testify. The compromise felt dirty, but necessary. Using grandfather's memory for leverage violated everything he'd taught me about honor. The personnel file revealed what Kyle's parents had hidden. They'd known about inappropriate contact, but stayed silent during their custody battle. Neither wanted the scandal affecting their case. Their son sacrificed for their legal convenience. The documentation showed complaints filed then withdrawn, concerns raised then buried, parents choosing personal battles over their child's safety. The personnel file contained something worse than Kyle's parents' silence. A handwritten note from a substitute teacher dated 3 years ago, describing Kyle leaving Ms. Khalifa's classroom in tears. The complaint had been filed, investigated, then mysteriously dropped. Kyle hadn't been her first target. He'd been protecting others even before he started collecting evidence. The realization hit me like a physical blow. That afternoon, Kyle's journal arrived by overnight mail. He'd sent it before flying back, wanting me to understand everything. Page after page documented his methodical planning. He'd known nobody would believe a 12-year-old, so he'd waited, gathered proof, protected younger students while sacrificing his own childhood. One entry stood out. After graduation, I'll report everything. Until then, I watch and document. The weight of his sacrifice pressed down on me. Ms. Khalifa submitted her teaching portfolio for a district award the week before trial. My sister's friend worked at the district office and leaked me a copy. The portfolio contained reflections on forming special connections with struggling students. Kyle's name appeared multiple times. She'd written about helping him through his parents' divorce, about their unique bond. Her own words contradicted every claim of professional distance. The prosecutor finally understood the pattern after reviewing everything. 2 victims plus the portfolio plus the digital evidence equaled a case. But he warned me that without Kyle's testimony, conviction remained unlikely. Everything depended on one traumatized kid's ability to face his abuser in court. The pressure felt crushing. I discovered Ms. Khalifa's Instagram post from 2 years ago through reverse image searching. She'd tagged herself at her apartment with a timestamp that directly contradicted her sworn affidavit, claiming she'd never been alone with Kyle there. The metadata proved the post predated any accusations. Her own social media presence had created the evidence we needed. Kyle's flight landed at 6 a.m. I picked him up at the airport, shocked by his appearance. He'd lost weight, developed nervous tics, aged years and months. We drove in silence to the courthouse. He clutched a folder of additional evidence he'd found in Colorado, photos of gifts she'd given him, cards with inappropriate messages, physical proof to support the digital trail. The courtroom filled with teachers, parents, and students, everyone forced to pick sides publicly. Lucas sat with Ms. Khalifa's supporters, avoiding eye contact. My family sat behind me, their presence both comfort and reminder of what this fight had cost. Ms. Khalifa entered looking equally destroyed. Weight loss, trembling hands, dark circles under her eyes. We'd both paid heavy prices. Kyle took the stand with visible reluctance. His voice shook as he recounted the grooming, the escalation, the confusion of a 12-year-old being told he was special. He described her apartment, details only someone who'd been inside would know. The Christmas ornament she kept year-round, the photo of her college boyfriend she'd compared him to. Specific, devastating details. The cross-examination felt like watching someone get tortured. Ms. Khalifa's lawyer attacked every inconsistency, every date discrepancy, every moment of confusion. Kyle broke down twice, asking for water, struggling to continue, but he persisted, methodically presenting his evidence, explaining his younger self's inability to understand what was happening. Then Lucas stood up in the gallery. His face had gone pale. He asked to address the court, explaining he'd followed me that night months ago, worried about my safety. He'd seen Kyle's car at Ms. Khalifa's apartment complex, the same car that should have been at his family's restaurant. He couldn't lie under oath, even if it meant betraying Ms. Khalifa. His testimony shifted everything. The judge ordered a recess. In the hallway, Ms. Khalifa's carefully constructed image finally cracked. She cornered Kyle, begging him to understand their connection, their love story. Security had to physically separate them. Her lawyer tried damage control, but everyone had seen the mask slip. The delusion ran deeper than anyone realized. Digital forensics experts authenticated the chat logs and social media posts. The metadata proved these communications preceded any reports or accusations. Ms. Khalifa's deleted messages were recovered from server backups. Each recovered message added another brick to the wall of evidence. Technology had preserved what she'd tried to destroy. During her testimony, Ms. Khalifa couldn't maintain her victim narrative. She kept referring to her relationship with Kyle, catching herself mid-sentence, trying to reframe. But the truth leaked through. She genuinely believed they'd had something special. The prosecutor let her talk, letting the jury see the delusion, the inability to recognize the power imbalance, the predatory nature of targeting a grieving 12-year-old. The prosecutor asked for my input on sentencing recommendations. Prison or mandatory treatment? I thought about Kyle's destroyed childhood childhood, his family's forced relocation, the other victims who might never come forward. But I also saw Ms. Khalifa's genuine mental illness. I recommended both. Treatment within the prison system. She was sick, but had still chosen to hurt children. The verdict came after 3 days of deliberation. Guilty of sexual abuse of a minor. Guilty of abuse of position of trust. Required to register as a sex offender. The judge sentenced her to 8 years with mandatory psychological treatment. Not the maximum, but enough. Kyle collapsed in his mother's arms. Justice felt hollow, but necessary. The school board meeting that followed turned into a reckoning. Parents demanded answers about how complaints had been buried. 3 administrators resigned in disgrace. 4 teachers who'd known but stayed silent faced professional reviews. The community split between those who'd supported the victims and those who'd enabled abuse through willful blindness. Ms. Khalifa's apartment was cleaned out by her parents. They found journals documenting her obsessions with multiple students over the years. More victims came forward for civil suits. The tutoring center she'd started closed within a week. Her teaching license was permanently revoked in multiple states. The systems that had protected her finally turned against her. Kyle flew back to Colorado immediately after testifying. We kept in touch through encrypted messages. He started intensive therapy, slowly processing the trauma. His little sister began speaking to him again after understanding the truth. His family's restaurant reopened in Denver, free from the shadow of scandal. Healing would take years, but it had begun. Some friends returned to my life. Others remained lost forever. Marcus reached out after the verdict, apologizing for abandoning me. But our friendship had fundamentally changed. Trust, once broken, never fully repairs. I learned to accept the permanent damage to some relationships while appreciating those who'd eventually seen the truth. My college applications went out late, with explanation letters about the gap year I'd need. Some schools rejected me based on the controversy. Others saw a student who'd fought for justice despite personal cost. I ended up at a state school, not my dream college, but a fresh start. The scandal would always be part of my story, searchable online forever. My brother's friends slowly started coming over again. The whispers faded as new scandals replaced ours. My parents' marriage survived, though the financial strain took years to recover from. We never spoke about that year at family dinners, but the scars remained visible in small ways. In my father's reluctance to trust institutions, in my mother's overprotective hovering. The flash drive that started everything sat in evidence storage, its contents part of permanent court records. Sometimes I wondered what would have happened if I just deleted it, chosen the easy path. But then I'd remember Kyle at 12, trapped and afraid, gathering evidence because no adult would protect him. The choice had never really been a choice. Other boys from the screenshots came forward privately, sharing their stories with therapists and family. Not all pressed charges, but they found validation in the verdict. Ms. Khalifa's pattern of predation had finally been exposed and stopped. Each boy who found closure was a small victory in a war that had cost everyone involved. Mr. Brooks was reinstated after investigation cleared him. His marriage survived, barely. His wife gave birth to a healthy daughter. They sent me a card, not exactly forgiveness, but acknowledgement. Collateral damage in pursuit of justice. Another weight I'd carry forever. The retired Principal Edwards died 6 months after providing the personnel files. At his funeral, his widow thanked me for giving him the chance to correct an old mistake. He'd known something was wrong, but had chosen institutional protection over student safety. His final act had been choosing differently. Mr. Khalifa served 4 years before being released on parole with strict supervision. She moved out of state, required to stay away from schools and minors. Her parents issued a statement about mental health awareness and the importance of early intervention. They never acknowledged the victims directly. I graduated with honors despite missing so much school during the trial. The ceremony felt surreal, walking across the stage in the same auditorium where everything had started. Some parents still whispered, but I'd learned to hold my head high. Survival was its own form of victory. Kyle graduated from his Colorado school valedictorian. He sent me a photo in his cap and gown, finally looking like a teenager again instead of a haunted child. He'd been accepted to an engineering program across the country. A new beginning, far from all reminders of the past. We promised to stay in touch, but knew we probably wouldn't. Some bonds are forged in trauma and need distance to heal. Working with a nonprofit supporting abuse survivors became my focus in college. Not as public advocacy or fame-seeking, but quiet support for others navigating similar situations. Every young person who felt heard and believed was a small repayment of the debt I owed Kyle for his bravery. The last time I saw Ms. Khalifa was at a gas station 2 states away, 3 years later. She didn't recognize me at first. When she did, her face crumpled. She looked smaller, older, medicated calm replacing manic energy. We didn't speak. I paid for my gas and left, feeling nothing but tired sadness for the wreckage she'd created. My family recovered slowly. Trust rebuilt through small acts and patient love. My brother grew up knowing his older brother had chosen difficult truth over comfortable lies. My parents learned to support without fully understanding. We became closer through shared survival, bonded by weathering the storm together. Kyle sent one final message on the 5th anniversary of Ms. Khalifa's arrest. Just 2 words, thank you. I stared at them for an hour, remembering the terrified kid in his bedroom, surrounded by moving boxes, handing me evidence he'd gathered alone. Those 2 words carried the weight of everything we'd survived. Looking back, I wouldn't change my choices. The cost was real. Friendships, reputation, financial security, innocence. But Kyle and others found justice. Ms. Khalifa was stopped. Systems that enabled abuse faced scrutiny. Sometimes doing right means accepting permanent scars. I learned to live with mine, knowing they were earned protecting those who couldn't protect themselves.